Hello, everyone, and welcome to UCIBL Applied Innovations VC Speaker Series. It's our webinar featuring conversations with VCs and investors. Our goal for this webinar series is to continue to connect the Southern California innovation ecosystem with the experts and resources that will help entrepreneurs and founders navigate the current crisis and thrive in the recovery that we're confident is on the way. For today's webinar, we're pleased to have with us Kwame Ulmer, venture partner at Wavemaker Three-Sixty Health, which is a medtech-only investor that focuses on value-based health. Kwame has a great background and our conversation should be a lot of fun. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge and thank our sponsor for the VC Speaker Series, Kwame Martins. They're consistently ranked as one of the top intellectual property firms in the nation and worldwide. Kwame Martins has close to 275 lawyers and scientists and dedicates its practice to all aspects of intellectual property and technology law, including litigation. The firm is headquartered in Orange County. We are very fortunate at UCIBL Applied Innovation to have Kwame as strong supporters of our mission and the VC Speaker Series. More information can be found at www.knobie.com. So, all right, a few details about today's webinar. So unlike regular Zoom meetings, you can't unmute yourself and you can't turn on your video. So if you have a question, please type the question in the Q&A box, not the chat box. I'll moderate those and we'll ask those throughout our discussion, or we'll do it at the end. So after the webinar ends, we'll keep the Zoom webinar open so Kwame and I can type in some answers into the Q&A box if your question didn't get asked and answered live. So please keep an eye on that Q&A box after we wrap up. So with that, Kwame, want to go ahead and join us on video, and we'll get started.
Hi, Louis. It's really good to see you again.
Yeah, same here. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. It's a great day in Southern California.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It should be a lot of fun. So before we get started, though, I'd like the audience to get a little bit of sense about you and your background, kind of where you grew up, et cetera. So why don't you give us a little bit about that early background? Where did Kwame Ulmer come from?
Yeah, I grew up in a working class neighborhood in Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, to be specific. Son of two social workers. And really, that's where I got exposed to really being about helping people. That's what both my parents were focused on. Studied at Lincoln University on scholarship, studied physics. First thought I was going to be a mechanical engineer, but fell in love with the campus of Lincoln and graduated a degree in physics there. So those are my early days.
Okay, so physics, and you ended up kind of on the life science side, right? So, speaking of which, then on the life science side, the bulk of your early career was spent at the Food and Drug Administration, which certainly everyone's a lot more familiar with now. So can you tell us about your experience and the various roles that you had there?
Yeah, so I got exposed to the FDA via a UVA colleague. I went to the University of Virginia for graduate school, started off as a reviewer. So the person who looks at 510K applications, pre-market applications called PMAs, IDEs, which are applications to be able to start a clinical trial. Did all that work in the cardiovascular space for about 4.5 years. After that, I was really interested in opportunities in management. So took a role as a first-line supervisor in the ophthalmic space. Was fortunate enough to get really familiar with LASIK and actually oversaw one of the few panels on one of the rare side effects associated with LASIK. So did that for about 2.5 years and spent the last 4.5 years at the FDA as a director or deputy director in a division that evaluated everything from dental devices to a lot of the PPE and infection control products that we're all really interested in now. So respirators was a category of technologies that we evaluated, and I did over the last 4.5 years at FDA.
Well, so there's a couple of things I want to kind of drill on there. So you worked in the ophthalmic industry, and obviously Orange County in Southern California is kind of big in the ophthalmic industry. So you, at the time, were you engaging with any of the kind of big OC firms in the ophthalmology industry back then?
Absolutely. So, even back then, the big players, I probably, name a couple, AMO and
Yep.
all the big players would be iterating on their LASIK systems. So definitely the bigger players. Had opportunity to go on a couple site visits, some of the major eye centers, and really, it was a wonderful time. It was a wonderful time getting to expose to some of those innovative companies.
Okay, cool. Then from FDA, you jumped over to industry. You joined Danaher, which also has a big Orange County connection, but you joined them on the East Coast, right, in the Washington area. So what did you do at Danaher?
Yeah, so I started out at the dental platform, visiting different business units and helping them with their FDA regulatory strategy, doing gap assessments, understanding what they had in place in terms of a quality management system and documentation that would be important for an FDA inspection to help them close those gaps. So I did that at the platform level for the first year, had a great boss who allowed me to finish my MBA. When I finished my MBA, my family and we moved out to California, and I took a role as a vice president of regulatory and quality at one of the dental implant businesses.
Oh, okay.
It's a credit to one of my favorite and best bosses, Bob Durgan, that he allowed me to stay put, finish my MBA, and then move out to sunny SoCal.
Oh, good. So that brought your whole family out here. Well, we're glad, and I think the ecosystem's glad that you made it out here, frankly. So after a few years of that, you started Ulmer Ventures, and you wanted to, I guess at that point, kind of take this knowledge that you had of FDA and regulatory and start a regulatory strategy consulting firm and kind of move it to, I dare say a little bit entrepreneurial of you, right? Kind of taking a leap from the big company and starting something on your own.
Yeah, and to try and connect the dots, I have known and knew back then that I wanted to work in the medical device industry, but I was always extremely curious about the life of an early stage company. And by that time, I had accumulated about 15 years of experience in regulatory. I felt like that's what I could give back and how I could be helpful. And most of the companies in the medical device business that interact with the FDA, believe it or not, are startups. They're early stage companies. So even though at the FDA, I was meeting with vice presidents at Boston Scientific and Medtronic, most of my time was meeting with early stage companies that were lesser known. So did that, started the regulatory strategy firm, and most of the clients that I work with are indeed early stage companies, which has been great.
Oh, very cool. So what are some of the kind of the, you've been in it so long, you were at FDA for such a long time, then kind of with Ulmer Ventures, but are there any general lessons or strategies that you share with your clients about navigating the FDA process? So what's something that, companies generally don't know, you're helping them out, and then they learn and they know?
Yeah, I would say at a broad level, it's really important in early stage companies. What we work on is getting a crisp indications for use statement. This may sound really tactical, but it's really important. Really getting clear on the claims that they want to make and the features of their product. And from there, everything else can be figured out. You can flesh out your regulatory strategy. You can flesh out your clinical strategy. You can flesh out, how you phase in your implementation of your quality management system. But those are kind of the key stepping points. And often when I'm meeting with companies, they may be so early in their journey that we're writing that indications for use statement together. But the crisper that is, the easier the interactions with the FDA are. And it actually, as you go through that process of defining those three elements, it becomes crystal clear the nature of the questions you should have for the FDA. So that's what I find consistently is the process we have to go through.
That's interesting to me because I would imagine from my perspective that a lot of entrepreneurs and founders, they in the med tech industry, it would seem like they would know their claims. So do you feel like, do they come in and their claims are unspecified or their claims are too broad? It's surprising that, the claims that they're making is where you like to start and that everything leads from there.
Yeah, and believe it or not, a classic profile at the time I'm engaging, maybe they've gotten some NIH dollars. They didn't get forced to write these things down yet. They maybe have a concept paper. They have a basic investor presentation, and they want to raise seed capital. And yeah, believe it or not, we're talking about tightening up the claims. We're talking about design inputs. We're talking about design controls. We're at that stage where they're building their team. They're going from a founder, co-founder to, those first through couple key hires. So those things are still getting pinned down.
Okay. All right. Cool. So while you're building your regulatory firm, a strategic consulting firm, Ulmer Ventures, in 2018, Wavemaker 360 Health was coming together. So why don't you give us the kind of the origin story of Wavemaker 360 Health? Kind of who pulled it together? What was their initial vision? How did they create the firm and then that first fund?
Yeah. What I had some sense of is, and I appreciated when I got involved with the firm, is it's in some ways a classic origin story. So John Nackel, one of the general partners, is a healthcare executive with over 40 years of experience. He ran the global healthcare practice at Ernst & Young and had this amazing Rolodex that he built up over decades. And venture capital is absolutely a relationship business. And he had known the other general partner, Jay Goss, for at least 10 years. Again, relationship, long-standing relationship. And Jay Goss had the viewpoint of being a CXO at many companies over a 20-year career. And really, it was a match made in heaven, complementary. Sometimes you don't see that. Sometimes you see two general partners with very similar backgrounds. They kind of double down on the same experience, but they had really complementary backgrounds, and they decided to launch a fund. And they were X million dollars down the road when they had dinner with one of the principals at Wavemaker, a storied fund in Southern California. And it was actually, as the story is told to me, I believe it was at a PF Chang's in Encino. Not giving away too much of the secret sauce, but it was a pivotal meeting because Wavemaker, who didn't know healthcare, and this is a classic story, wanted to be an anchor investor in what was at the time 360 Health. But you bring the relationships of John Nackel, the startup experience of Jay Goss, and the credibility of an anchor investor but like Wavemaker, and the LPs just started rolling in. And shortly thereafter, I joined to help build out the traditional medical device piece of the pie. But that's the story. It went from a proof of concept fund that was probably going to be $5 million or less to when Wavemaker joined, the first fund ended up being about $17.5 million assets under management.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I've known Eric for a long time. In fact, I don't even remember how I met Eric, but oh yeah, I think it was soon after he kind of started his fund. We met, and yeah, he's a great investor kind of in the Southern California ecosystem because of the number of entrepreneurs that he's helped kind of with that very early part, right? He and as you said, I think what he does for entrepreneurs is really bring that credibility and the relationships, and he's actually able to leverage relatively small amounts of capital into much larger rounds and a lot of good co-investors to really kind of broaden out the round size and give these tech entrepreneurs a leg up. So that's out of Wavemaker Partners. But then now Wavemaker 360 Health, they kind of use that same approach for on the healthcare side of things. So one of the things I think was interesting when you guys started, when Wavemaker 360 Health started, was there had been a big kind of shakeout in medical device venture capital firms for a variety of reasons. So in Southern California, there really weren't very many, and some of the ones that had been there had left. So I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, kind of where the venture capital, as far as medical devices, where it was, kind of what happened to it, and what kind of gap was filled here with Wavemaker.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a tie into the FDA here. So the US has and remains net, the place with the largest concentration of medical device companies. Second is Europe, and then probably Japan or comes in second, or China at this point. But what was happening was it was easier to get onto the market in Europe. And the perception was the FDA bar was so high that a lot of startups started launching in Europe. The capital started to shift a bit to Europe. And the capital in early stage companies or medtech companies started to dry up, consolidation in VC firms, et cetera. And that's kind of where LA in particular was. There were a modest number when Wavemaker 360 Health started investing of healthcare funds that actively were investing in medical device companies. So it was a unique opportunity to carve out a niche for us in Southern California in general, but LA in specific. Now we know all the activity going in Irvine, but even in Irvine, I've spent many an hour driving down to Irvine because there's a lot of deal flow there. Even the number of investors in Irvine has kind of shrunk a bit. Investors in traditional med tech companies. And to go off a little bit on a tangent, you're seeing a couple of really interesting innovation studio models pop up as well, where a small basket of med tech companies run by really experienced med tech professionals are just taking it from concept to flip. Right. But we're a traditional VC fund, and we're one of the few in the game still because of the consolidation in the field.
Yeah. I think it's there was certainly consolidation, as you said, but there seemed to be the runways were extended. Let's just kind of put it that way. So for a lot of portfolio companies, there was a period where it was taking a lot longer to get to market with their products, to get all the way through regulatory, get all the way through reimbursement. And so I think what happened in that era was that the smaller firms and funds essentially kind of got to their end of their own runway, right? I mean, each firm and each fund has a set investing schedule and a set life for the fund. If you can't create investments that increase in value and get their returns, it's going to be hard to raise that follow-on fund. So we saw a lot of firms that just decided that that they weren't going to be able to be in it anymore, and so that really created an opportunity. And I'm impressed that Wavemaker 360 Health was able to come in and fill that. And frankly, I believe there's room for more. I've talked to some managers who were interested in funds that I said, there's definitely room for more investors, some local investors here in Southern California. So it's great that Wavemaker got almost, dare I say, almost a 3-year head start or two plus year head start on a lot of these areas and been able to build that. So anyway, let's get into 360 Health a little bit more. So your firm's thesis is that healthcare is transitioning from fee-for-service to value-based payments. So can you tell our audience, what does that mean, and how does that relate to kind of the specific sectors then that you guys focus on?
Yeah, so for decades, and it still persists in most of America, physicians, hospitals get paid based on services they provide, fee-for-service, under these specific reimbursement codes. But in pockets of America, because of legislation under the Obama primarily, there was an acceleration of reimbursement in lump sums of money such that the hospital systems could manage that lump sum of money as they see fit. And if they met certain health outcomes, reduction in things like rehospitalization rates, they could even get bonuses for the level of reimbursement. So it can be quite lucrative, this business model, if you can manage your expenses and obviously treat people in a reasonable way. So what it has led to is a lot of innovation in specific areas. For example, getting patients out of the hospital and helping them heal in the home to reduce the cost to the hospital so they can take a larger share of profit, at the same time increasing and speeding the health outcomes for the patient. And we maybe will get into it a little bit later, but a great example of that is a company we invested in called Focus Motion, which is a wearable that helps people who've had total knee replacement heal in the home and be compliant to their rehabilitation exercises and heal much quicker. So everybody wins. You know, there's a little bit more bottom line for the hospitals and providers, and the patients actually heal quicker because they're more compliant in their rehab exercises. So that's a great example of taking advantage of this new business model.
So in this new business model, does it generally tend to a different almost payer then, or is the payer ultimately the same? It's just the incentives are different.
Yeah, I think the incentives are different, and the savvy payers are adopting this model as aggressively as they can. But yeah, the economics can work out to the benefit of the payer, for sure.
Okay. Do you does the firm invest in med tech or medical device technology that isn't directly related to value based? Is that a exclusive thesis, or is that a guiding principle within other opportunities?
Wow, we need to put that on our website. It's a guiding principle, but I love the way you put that. But we're not exclusive.
Okay.
Our guiding star is, obviously investing in companies that are venture grade, that we think have management teams that can show the ability to raise, run, and recruit. We do talk about the 3 R's. So like many VC firms, that's our operating model. So we're opportunistically investing in companies that don't necessarily utilize the bundle payment model.
Okay. See, I just got one from you: raise, run, and recruit. That's a good one. I think I'm going to have to apply that to some of the due diligence I use on some of these companies. All right. So we kind of know the guiding principle and what you're looking at. Can you tell us about the stage of investment that you guys generally do, and the criteria in terms of do you generally require first in human, or kind of stage of development as well as stage of investment, seed, pre-seed, series A, kind of in that context?
Yeah. So we're a classic seed stage fund, and for medtechs, and we're talking about traditional medical devices, what that looks like typically is the company has a working prototype or close to a final finished device that they have submitted to the FDA if they're FDA regulated. Sometimes we invest in companies that don't have high regulatory bar, but let's just say that's the case. They've probably gotten a couple $1 million of NIH dollars, and we're their first institutional investor, and we'll stay with them. If they need a bridge note, we may participate in that up through to the A for companies, obviously, that are doing well. But that's our typical journey with a company.
Okay. I think the thing that you said there that's important for founders to think about is that you would like to see things that have already had at least an initial submission to FDA.
Yeah, and we touched on it earlier, and thank you for being so candid and bringing it up. As a typical 10-year fund, we are trying to increase the chance of a liquidation event for the company. And to do that, we time our investment so that they're going to be in market ideally within 6 months, or they're in market and we're helping you get your first $1 million of sales because of our relationships. And I could talk about that a little bit more, but we have over 80 LPs that are healthcare executives, and they help before FDA, after you have that FDA marketing decision, and trying to scale. So that's why we time it the way we do.
Okay. All right. So if the founders, if they're still early, they're still doing their benchtop work, and they're not really ready yet for that, or they haven't done that FDA submission, probably best to kind of keep working on it and then approach Wavemaker kind of at that stage.
Yeah. And a couple quick shout outs. We have a mutual friend, CEO of Cooler Heads. And I'd say this just to say that, again, it's a relationship game. I met the CEO of Cooler Heads, I guess at this point, at least 9 months ago. we've continued to stay in touch, and it's not unusual for a VC firm in ours to meet a CEO maybe at year 0 and make an investment in year 2. And that actually just happened with Carlsmed, company based in San Diego. So I just say that to say it's a long game, relationship game, and when the time is right, we will jump.
All right. That's good. And believe it or not, I clicked and I look, and Kate from Cooler Heads is in the audience. So she got
hey, Kate.
She got the shout out there from both Luis and Kwame here online. So I'm sure she's smiling. Yeah, we're both big fans of Kate and Carlsmed as well. You know, Carlsmed has some good investors here from the Orange County ecosystem. So we're rooting for them as well. So from that first fund that was, you know, kind of started by the team that you guys and you joined pretty quickly on, you guys, from my perspective, was a pretty active first fund. Made a kind of a fairly, you call it large or high number of investments kind of out of the gate. So roughly how many portfolio companies in Fund 1?
32, and that was above average in terms of cadence. We're fortunate because, one, we believe we get high quality deal flow because of our network and actually partnerships with you, Luis. I've said it to you privately, I'll say it now. We do well because we are very intentional and have partnerships with people like you who know serious investor grade companies. So that makes, you know, we started out, it was a team of 4, right? And we can only do but so much, but with these strong partnerships with you, with J&J, with City of Hope, we get amazing deal flow. And that's how we've been able, one of the reasons why we've been able to move so fast. All
right, well, that's we appreciate that, and keep up the investments. Believe me, we're excited about that. So that 32 companies in that first fund. So can you tell us about maybe some of the successes there? You know, which ones have been successful, or, you know, are generally speaking any fast failures and any lessons from some of those fast failures in Fund 1?
Yeah, so VCs love to talk about their successes, but the dirty little secret is their portfolio will have at least a third, even the best VCs, at least a third of their companies will go bankrupt. One of ours did. And it was a case, we did a little bit of a postmortem of going against some really big strategic competitors and having really lumpy sales, which is not unusual in the early life of a company. Some of those things are hard to avoid as an early stage company. You want a big enterprise contract, but that big enterprise contract may represent 50% of your sales in any given year. So there's some risks there. So that was the early failure, which is typical for any venture firm. Some great successes. Carlsmed, I'm over the moon about how fast they've been moving. They got breakthrough designation, which I think they did a press release on. With that breakthrough designation, they get 4 years of reimbursement by the CMS. They have some really strong relationships with providers. And you're going to hear some great things about them. You're also have heard about a company called Trusted Health, which was featured in either Forbes or Fortune, I believe Fortune, as a unicorn. We invested in them when they were had a valuation of about 12 million, and we reinvested. Now they have a valuation of north of about 225 million over a short period of time. And they connect contingent nurses to get them placements. So during COVID, obviously their business has just blossomed because nurses are not at a shortage for looking for work.
Yeah,
So those are some great successes. A really strong CEO at Trusted, and we're happy to have backed them.
Good. You mentioned one thing, and if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on it a little bit because our audience may not kind of know the details. Can you expand a little bit on what breakthrough designation means for Carlsmed and maybe for other companies? What does that mean in terms of FDA? What does that allow you to do in terms of CMS, et cetera? Maybe it's CMS and not FDA, but you'll explain.
Yeah. So the FDA probably 4 years ago implemented this program where they intentionally identify companies with technologies that typically are addressing a new patient population for a particular disease or dramatically expanding access to treatment for a disease. It is without a doubt new, breakthrough, and the FDA has said we've never seen anything quite like that. And about a month ago, CMS issued a draft rule where they said, if your medical device is designated as breakthrough, you can receive 4 years of reimbursement as soon as you get your marketing decision. So as you might imagine, my consulting firm gets a fair amount of calls about how do we apply for breakthrough designation, and it really has stimulated a lot of activity. So that's breakthrough designation.
All right. Well, you left yourself wide open for that. So this is something that the companies apply for. It's not just FDA kind of with its magic wand tapping a few on the head. So at what point do companies begin to think about that, or should companies begin to think about that and apply for breakthrough designation? Because we know entrepreneurs, and that's why we love entrepreneurs. Everyone thinks they have a breakthrough designation, right? They may not, but that's what everyone dreams of.
Yeah. I would say when you have a working prototype, definitely kind of out of alpha version, if I could use that software term, and you have confidence that you have the ability to build a team, execute, to actually manufacture a product and deliver. So that's typically when company is completing a seed round, and you have a vice president of R&D.
Yeah, let me interject though, from an FDA standpoint. So, when along the FDA path do you tell the FDA, we think this is a breakthrough or we want that status? That's what I kind of meant on the FDA side of things.
So before clinical trials, before you submit your application, your formal marketing application, probably at least 6 to 9 months before, if you think it needs clinical trial, at least six months before you want to start that clinical trial, I would submit that application so you can work out the clinical trial you will need for an FDA marketing decision.
Right, and then get the breakthrough designation on that. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I'm going to give Matthew, who just asked a question in the chat, I'm going to give him a pass on this. As a reminder, everyone, put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat. I'm glad I actually glanced over and I was able to see it there. But Matthew asked a specific question, but I'll broaden it a little bit. What about a geographic focus for the fund? So where do you invest geographically?
We actually are we're open to investing throughout the world. 90% of our investments have been in the US, and we have venture partners on the East Coast. So we have coverage there. In the Mid-Atlantic, in Nashville, we have team members there. And we've invested in Boston. We've invested, as you know, in Southern California heavily. We've invested in companies based in North Carolina. And I think we did our first Canadian deal in Fund 1 too. Where's our concentration of investments? California. Are we open to investing anywhere? Yes, we are.
Got it. Great. All right. Let's talk about kind of from your own background, your own perspective. What are some, and not necessarily Wavemaker, I'm sure this is part of Wavemaker. What are you personally excited about in med tech technology? What are some of those areas that you think are kind of hot and exciting?
So I've been intrigued by companies that are building robots for the home. To help, it's called aging tech in our field, to help seniors heal in the home or assist healthcare providers. That's a really interesting kind of, I wouldn't call it a mega trend, but it's a trend that I've been tracking, and we've been looking at companies that facilitate that. And then mental health specifically, I'm interested in, the VR and the hardware normally is kind of the commodity, but actually this is not traditional med tech, but prescription digital therapeutics that actually treat symptoms associated with different conditions, anxiety, depression. And there's still a lot of opportunity there. We all know about the pair therapeutics of the world, but I still know that there's a lot of innovation going on in the mental health space with serious clinical data sets that validate software as a medical device to help treat conditions.
Wow.
Yeah. Those are some of the trends that I find interesting.
No, yeah, that's actually very, very interesting. I've seen a few companies in that, maybe a little bit more on the software for diagnosis, right? So software for that is used to help diagnose or help predict the path of if it's a brain disorder or something along those lines. I've seen that, but digital therapeutics is that's definitely kind of cutting edge and something you'll expect is going to be out there. What approach is the FDA taking on digital therapeutics? What are payers? How are payers looking at digital therapeutics, health plans, et cetera?
So there's a lot of activity, and the FDA is loosening regulations to facilitate and spur innovation. Specifically, during COVID, the requirements to develop a digital health solution to treat a mental health condition has lessened, such that you can go to market with proper labeling, cybersecurity, and a few other requirements without a formal FDA application for a telehealth solution to treat anxiety, insomnia, et cetera. Which is unheard of. So that's one. We talked about CMS, and then there's another. In terms of regulation, the lessening of the regulatory requirement. It'll come to me in a minute, but that's the main one: the lessening of the regulatory requirements for digital health. Bakul Patel has launched a Center of Excellence for Digital Health. So he started in the Center for Devices, and he has led regulation of digital health solutions for, at least 9-10 years now. But it was in the Center for Devices. Now there's a FDA-wide Center of Excellence where he is developing regulatory tools to speed review of digital health solutions.
Okay.
So the FDA has doubled down on investments in that area.
Okay, very cool. All right, so your Wavemaker 360 Health is now, you're raising your second fund, right? So where does the second fund stand in terms of its first close? And for the non-insiders out there in the audience, essentially when a fund has its first close, that's generally speaking when it can start making investments out of that, and then they keep raising money until their final close. So where does Wavemaker 360 Health stand on Fund 2? Have you had your first close? Are you investing out of that? What's your target for that, et cetera?
Yes, we've been fortunate enough to have a significant number of Fund 1 and this is common, and I know you know this, Luis, but several of our Fund 1 investors have committed to Fund 2 at a higher dollar amount. And our goal is Fund 2 to be at least around 50 million. We're halfway there. And we're rounding out closing of the first tranche, which is actually underway right now. So it's an exciting time. We've increased the number of assets under management by 2 with Fund 2 already.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that I think, what did you say? 80 of your LPs in Fund 1 were healthcare executives. So how's Fund 2 kind of shaping up? Are there, obviously you said a lot of resubscriptions, which is great. But what are some of the kind of ideal, if you could write up your ideal LP, your ideal limited partner for Fund 2, kind of who would that be? And if there's anybody in the audience that might fit that, I'm sure you'd love to talk to them, but who would that be?
Yeah, so our Fund 1 was comprised largely, with the exception of Wavemaker, of individuals, ultra high net worth individuals. Fund 2, we have corporate investors that have joined our group of LPs are cap table. We're having active conversations with additional corporate investors, some pension funds, and we can do this now because the size of our fund, our target size, is such that it makes it possible for pension funds of a certain size to invest in us. It's a numbers thing, and you just can't raise money from pension funds when you have a $20 million fund. But when you have close to 100 million assets under management, the universe opens up. We also are talking to family offices as well. Again, another universe is starting to open up a bit.
Good for you. Well, listen, good luck in all of that. Where more active funds investing in the area it's great for the entire ecosystem and what you've already done. So we wish you the best of luck on that. So let's it wouldn't be fair here in November if I didn't ask you this. So I'm going to ask you for some predictions here as it relates to government. So, you were at FDA during the George W. Bush administration, and then at the beginning of the Barack Obama administration. Definitely the Affordable Care Act and the medical device tax caused a lot of turmoil. You were there during all of those times. So, what do you predict for FDA in a Biden administration? Any thoughts? What do you think? Anything you possibly might be hearing from colleagues, or what are your predictions for the next 4 years in FDA?
I think there's going to be two main themes. One, increased delegation of authority to the FDA, which is typical. FDA is a fairly independent, apolitical organization, and you're going to see a reversion back to that, where the FDA commissioner is a political animal, but everyone from that level down will be given the same level of autonomy that they have been given for decades. Two, because of the COVID crisis, anyone who's interacting with the FDA is likely seeing that there are resource constraints. So I actually predict there's going to be a bolus of additional capital given to the FDA to compensate for people who are actually working. There are people at FDA working overtime. And if you know anything about the government, actually working overtime and getting paid for overtime is unheard of. So there's going to be more dollars going to the FDA. And the relaxation of some of the regulatory requirements because we're in COVID, they'll go back up. But some of these innovations, like the CMS innovation, the breakthrough designation, I think will continue to expand, because I think under a Biden administration, there's going to be an emphasis on the FDA spurring innovation. And that's a trend actually that's been persistent through the Bush administration and the Obama administration, and you'll see more of that.
Okay, all right. Well, it's funny. Leave it to a healthcare guy to call an increase in funding a bolus of capital moving through. So that's your scientist is coming through there. So hopefully, more funding for FDA so that they can do that. And I think kind of increased autonomy or reversion to some increased autonomy. So that's good. All right. I definitely see the questions. I'm not ignoring any of the Q&A that some of the audience members have put there. I see that. We're going to allow some time for it, but we're going to switch topics a little bit here. And we're going to talk about diversity and equity, because it's become such a prominent topic in the country the last 5 months. And that topic has also made it into venture capital and, in the innovation ecosystem with startups. And it's also made its way into the medical device industry and kind of what's going on there. So there's a lot there, but let's talk first about founders and entrepreneurs. So what's your view of diversity? What's your firm's view of diversity in terms of founders and CEOs for medtech companies?
Yeah, well, I'll start off kind of with some candid truths. We did not start out with a thesis per se around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we are not what some people call an impact fund. So we didn't measure that. But over the course of investing, our LP started asking us, how many women-led companies have you invested in? And we started looking at that and we started measuring that. And I can say that our track record is above market. The market and trends are abysmal for firms that invest in women-led and ethnically diverse companies. We happen to be doing much better than industry averages, but we know we can do more. And we do that through our networks and relationships. So my relationships with underrepresented founding teams and my network facilitates more deal flow. And my personal and professional thesis is, as more anchor LPs invest in companies that are led by ethnic minorities, you'll see an increase in investment in companies that have more diverse management teams. It'll kind of trickle down. Industry-wide, I'll just touch on what's going on in the industry, and I'll talk about a nonprofit that I'm passionate about. Mm-hmm. AdvaMed, which is one of the largest industry trade organizations for medical devices, just released a set of principles around diversity, equity, and inclusion that they want every member company to adhere to. And those principles are going to be turned into actions. I know Ashley McAvoy at J&J is very focused on this. The CEO of Stryker, the chairman of AdvaMed, very focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Really quick anecdote, the CEO of Stryker at the large corporate level changed his board composition from less than 20% diverse to over 80% diverse over his tenure, because he's also the chairman of the board. Mm-hmm. And MedTech Color is a nonprofit focused on this issue of advancing representation of people of color in the medical device industry. And it's a network of 1,000 stakeholders. A third of them are early stage founders that are diverse: African Americans, Latinx, Asian Americans, Indian Americans. So that's a population of early stage companies that are looking for funding in the MedTech ecosystem.
Okay, so that's MedTech Color. So how can entrepreneurs in our audience learn about that? Just Google MedTech Color, they should come up, or
yeah, if you type in MedTech Color or go to medtechcolor.org, you'll get to learn more about us. And I'm excited to share that in March, we will have a pitch competition where we'll be, J&J as an anchor investor, along with ResMed, and California Healthcare Foundation. We'll be investing at least $100,000 of capital in early stage companies.
Okay, and then AdvaMed, I think most of our audience can probably find AdvaMed as well. So they can, folks can look at AdvaMed and see what those guiding principles are in that. So how about within the venture industry itself? You mentioned something that has come up before in some of these discussions, that it in fact may be the limited partners, the institutions that invest in venture capital firms that may drive some of this. But what's your own experience about what's working, what isn't working, kind of what hasn't worked within VC as far as equity, inclusion, diversity?
Yeah, so I'll start with from impact, from lowest to highest impact. So obviously at one level, some VC firms literally will put out a statement with no operating principles or action behind, we support Black Lives Matter. I'm just going to be direct. Like, that is one low-level act that some VC firms can do. The next is office hours. We want to meet with more diverse companies. I'm going to hold office hours once a month, and that can be impactful. The next level, I think, is strategic partnerships with organizations that already have access to diverse founding teams. MedTech Color, MedTech Women, National Society of Black Engineers, creating a pipeline so that you are, by design, seeing these companies that are diverse. And then the most impactful is having targets as a VC and term sheets that actively incentivize and write checks to diverse founding teams. So I feel like there's a continuum of impact, and that's how I think about it.
Got it. Good. Well, that's a nice framework to understand that. So one of the questions that I'm often asked, and so I like to ask each of the VCs that are on our panel. So person early in their career that would like to get into venture capital in healthcare or in life sciences? I'm sure you're asked this question. So what advice do you give to folks interested in VC as a career if they're early in their career or mid-career?
Yeah, so my story is I became aware of, so there are formal programs that are already best of breed that get you in the ecosystem. Highly selective. One is a Kaufman Fellows program.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually explored that, got accepted, and chose business school instead. That's a great pipeline. That's one explicit organization that has a track record of 15 years of grooming the next generation of VCs. There's a relatively new one called HBCU VC that targets growing the next generation of VCs or HBC community. But I would say if you're mid-career, take whatever expertise you have and lend it to an ecosystem like an accelerator, an angel group, et cetera, so that you're around a lot of entrepreneurs and can somehow get involved in deal flow. And consider, if you don't have a lot of cash, getting equity and investing in company using your services as a tool. So look, I don't have $25,000, but I'll give you $20,000 worth of services if you give me stocks in this company, shares in this company. And those are
and then do that to build a track record, essentially, right?
To build a track record. And as best you can, quite candidly, this is easier said than done. Try and get around high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals, because ultimately you need access to capital and you need deal flow. And if you can get both, that's the best scenario.
Right. And one of the two is a start. Both is definitely a start. So cool. All right. Why don't we grab some of the questions that have been stacked up here in the Q&A. So generally speaking, what are some of the mistakes that you see kind of with that healthcare startups make? And particularly those that might be counterintuitive? So greatest hits of mistakes or greatest flops.
So if you are a one-person operation and don't have a plan of how you're going to at least build out the next 3 to 5 hires, even though we will invest in companies that have one full-time employee, we need to see a picture, a map to building out a company with a core team. And so there is this kind of super rugged individualist sole founder that it's hard for them to succeed. That's one. Another one is not being crisp in your market penetration, your first $1 million of sales. Who is that going to come from specifically, and not trying to boil the ocean? So boiling the ocean and not really thinking clearly about team are some kind of common mistakes. And then it's a much I'll say the third one is going through some top tier accelerator so that you have a crisp, tight story, which is kind of table stakes, so that you don't distract potential investors because you don't have the right lexicon in place, and your credibility goes down a notch before you can even really get out the gate. So get to a good accelerator so all that is kind of polished up.
Good. I'm going to adapt this question a little bit because I think it's a little bit general. So why don't we adapt it a little bit? Foreign companies that, if you've invested in any foreign companies, are you also then helping them get into the US market?
Yes, we will. So our relationships are primarily in US-based customers. So if we're saying, yes, that's the bottom line, we will do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because of the relationship with the customers. How about preventive medicine? Has the firm done much in preventive medicine?
So we have invested in digital health, but I would say I'm trying to think of our portfolio companies, none with explicit claims around, I can't think of any with explicit claims around prevention, but definitely rehab, amelioration of symptoms, things of that nature. Yes.
Got it. So is the FDA, do you think, kind of driving some of the change from fee for service to value-based payments, or is that really the payers? I think that the question's out there, but my suspicion would be it's more probably the payers that are driving that. But is this an issue for FDA as well?
Uh, Candidly, no. The FDA has a
Okay.
very clear mandate around safety and effectiveness. CMS has a mandate around insurance, and they would get more involved in bundle payment versus fee for service. FDA doesn't get involved in that type of work.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, we've got a couple of other ones, but I think they're probably best kind of picked off individually. So, anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to kind of share with the crowd?
I would just say, since I'm a medtech guy, I first appreciate this immensely. This was as fun as I thought it was going to be, really, truly. I would just
Kind words.
think in terms of the long game for the CEOs in the company, and think about organizing your family finances so that you can weather a rough 6 months or 9 months. It's a long game. MedTech is a long game. And that would be my last thought.
Well, no, that's great, and I think it might even be longer than those 6 to 9 months. But yeah, you've got to do that prep. Well, listen, that's a good place to end it. Nice positive words. I like to end a little bit early and give everybody the gift of time. So, and we have some contact information kind of coming up. So please stay with us. I'll bring this slide back up. There we go, and take it to this one. So with that, I want to make sure, along with everybody, Kwame, we absolutely thank you for being part of this. You can see that Kwame's been generous enough to give us his email address, and there's also a general one on there, funding@wavemaker360.com. If you just want to send a question into there, you can join that. And also thank our sponsor again, Kenobi Martins. They're a unique intersection of technical intelligence and legal acumen for a world powered by innovation. I want to thank our technical producer, Travis Rubido, who's behind the scenes, and he works here at UCI Applied Innovation, and he's a great help for all of these webinars. And as you probably noticed, our VC Speaker Series is changing to a once-a-month cadence. So we'll do another one in December, before the holiday starts. So keep an eye out for on your emails for the announcement of that. And we'll also be starting at UCI Applied Innovation an entrepreneur speaker series. And so the emails on that one just went out yesterday. We're going to do the same thing. Richard Sudek is going to do the same thing with either serial entrepreneurs or very successful entrepreneurs. Our first guest is going to be a woman founder who's one of the first women founders to IPO, kind of directly as one of the founders in life sciences. So that's pretty exciting. So keep your eyes open for that. So with that, I think we'll end it up. Thanks again, Kwame. Kwame and I will hang around a little bit. We're going to shut off our video, but we'll hang around and we'll answer some of those questions in the that are stacked up in the Q&A box. But that'll be it. So thank you everyone for watching. Stay safe and have a great weekend.